Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into this week's edition of Stop, Look, and Listen. I'm your host, LeTroy Gardner. This week, we have writer, dancer, producer, musician, teacher. She has a new book out, just recently came out a few weeks ago, called Freedom Quest, a love story. She has a lot of credits to her name, which we'll dig into some of them throughout this conversation, whether it's producing film and television programs or, dancing with Mr. Show Business himself, being in numerous groups. She said if she was to come back, she would come back being able to sing in church like Aretha Franklin. I
Mm-hmm.
said she sort of resembles Joni Mitchell a little bit. Like if y'all look a little close. We have Debora Masterson. Welcome to the show, Debora.
Well, thank you, LeTroy. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, it's a
Yeah.
pleasure to have you. So like I said, you have pretty much had your pulse on the arts pretty much your entire life. Like, when did you get started? Take us to the genesis.
Wow. I started dancing when I was like 6 or 7. I got dance lessons. My parents put me in dance lessons so I could be graceful enough to get a husband. That's where it was at, back then.
Huh?
And I had 2 brothers. We were a very musical family. My 2 brothers sang, and they got the music lessons, interestingly enough, but they didn't let their only daughter have music lessons because I think they were worried about the drugs, the reputation for musicians. But funny, ironically, I fell in love with a musician, so they weren't very happy about that.
Yeah, yeah. So like, um, how did you take to it? Because I'll say in college I took some modern and classical dance classes. So it definitely requires a lot of discipline and
Yeah.
um you like making sure you point your feet a certain way and like just the swan like motions. Um how did how did you gravitate towards it?
Well, I was such a movement-centered person. I could not sit still. So I loved it. It was a great outlet for me because of that. I just had to move. I remember as I got older into my 20s, I thought there is no way I can sit at a desk and do, at that point too, I mean, the type of jobs that were available to me were very limited. I mean, as a woman, there were no sports, basketball, women's basketball didn't exist. That was never on the radar until Title IX came in, and so I might have been a runner, but the track. Honestly, I believe that I was told that if you couldn't dribble the ball more than 3 times, you had to pass it, and there was no track. They told us that our uterus would fall out if we ran. I'm serious. We're back in the 50s. So, there weren't a lot of outlets for movement for me. So dance was perfect. I really gravitated to it because of that. It was very creative too. So modern dance, tap, jazz, ballet. I mean, I did everything. Everything. I jokingly say I did all types of dance except belly dancing and pole dancing. So pole dancing did not exist back then either.
Which I mean, I think that would be a heck of a transition, like as far as like especially the arm strength, like how you could be able to use the pole dancing towards other forms of dancing. Which one was your favorite?
What, between pole dancing and belly
Nah, like modern
dancing?
and pole dancing,
Uh,
contemporary ballet.
yeah, pole dancing, at that point was like, that was only in the stripper clubs. Yeah, that didn't exist in the mainstream. What was my favorite? Wow. I love tap dancing. Um, I loved ballet, but I didn't really have the body for it. So I took ballet as I took ballet my whole career, but it was more of just a discipline to keep my body in shape. Like you said, pointing the toes and making sure you had the good alignment and all of that. I love modern, but after when I decided to go try to do a professional career, I didn't see myself in a modern dance troupe because I love to sing. I still love the music. And that's when I decided I had to do musical theater. So I had both, and musical theater, I could do jazz and tap and, it kind of combine all of that, all of the different types of dance and yet still have that music component. So, yeah.
So, like, how did you get on the radar of Sammy Davis Jr.?
Well, so that was kind of later, towards the end of my career, really. I after that show, I was 28, going on 29, and I found I was ready to get married, and but yeah, the Sammy Davis Jr. show. Well, the title was Sammy Stops the World, and it was a remake of the original musical called Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. And this was in 1978. And so I was living in Los Angeles at the time in West Hollywood. And so I would go over every Monday and pick up the magazine where all the auditions were in it. So Casting Call, I think, was the name of the magazine. And so, back in the day, there was no internet. So you had to drive over and pick up the magazine, and got back in the car, and I was just leafing through the magazine really quick, and I saw Sammy Davis Jr., this show that was happening, and the audition was literally like 2 hours later. And so I ran home. I'm like, I got to go to this. I ran home, showered really quickly, and went over. And honestly, I was the least prepared for that audition of any of the auditions that I had done, I think. And I don't know, maybe that's why I got it, because I walked in and they were like, what do you want to sing? And I'm like, I don't know, Summertime in the Key of C. And so maybe it was my blasé attitude or whatever, but I got a call back. And the call back, I ended up going to Leslie Brickus. I don't know if you're familiar with Leslie Brickus. I ended up going to his house in Beverly Hills. He was a big time musical theater and music producer from Great Britain, from England. And he
Mhm.
worked a lot with Sammy and others too. Anyway, I ended up at his house for the second callback, sitting in his little office in his house, and he was asking me questions and all that. And then boom, a little bit later, I was like, "You're in," and I was totally blown away. And so we toured San Diego, Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, and ended up dancing and performing at Lincoln Center in New York City. That was amazing. So yeah, it was quite heady moments, but quite amazing.
So, like somebody such as Sammy, who has done it all in various capacities, and you've pretty much same way, like multiple pathways. Like, how hard is it to maneuver in like those different worlds and still be able to um kind of rise to the
Mm,
occasion? Because like with you, you're a you're a musician, you're a dancer, you now you teach, you're writing, you're producing documentaries and television film and all of that. Like, how do you stay centered and focused on each objective?
You know, I think I focus on the work. I don't focus on where I'm going as much as I want to just focus on what I'm doing and the work. I think if your goal is trying to make it or if your goal is trying to be a star, that's the wrong goal. You need to focus on the work, and you need to do your homework. No, so that to me is what I focus on, and I've been very lucky. You know, not everybody has that opportunity. So being grateful for those opportunities is big, but ultimately, I see a lot of young people today. It's like, I want to be a star. I want to be an influencer. I want to be this. I want to be that. And I think I just really want to emphasize that it's about the art. It's about the work itself, doing the best work, the best art that you can do, and then let the chips fall as they may. And I'm not saying that you don't have to get yourself out there. You do. And especially now, unfortunately, you kind of you have to be your own agent, be your own pitch person. All of that is, and that's unfortunate, I think, because there's a lot of artists that are really great at their art, and they can't pitch themselves. Perfect example is the person who the book is about, Freedom Quest, my love of my life, my soulmate, Craig Ingraham. He could not, sell himself. He was great at the art, and that's all he cared about. And I remember having a discussion with him at one point later on in life and saying, look, you've all these incredible songs that you've written and recorded. He has over like 150 songs written and recorded, 4 albums streaming, a lot more, music recorded that nobody's heard. I said, how do you feel about the fact that nobody's really heard this music? He's like, I don't care. He goes, I made it. It's there. If they want to listen to it, and that's all that counts. I'm like, wow, I don't know if I completely believed him. I think there was kind of a hole in his heart that, he died and nobody had really acknowledged his music. But that was his answer. And I think that's a really legit answer, work, focus on the art, focus on what you're doing, make the best art that you can do. And then, with a little bit of luck, you know, it'll land in the right place. Be genuine, you know, and people will pick up on that.
Right. So I was on the website and I saw I think songs related to the book, and they're all his songs.
Yes, those are all his original recordings. So the book is called Freedom Quest, which was the band name, the 1973 band. And, it's a love story. It's about much more than just the band. Arguably, the Freedom Quest band in 1973, he was 26, 27 at that point. Arguably, some of the pinnacle of his music that he wrote and recorded, and the band was kick-ass, man. Oh my God. I mean, it was, well, David Benoit was on keyboards, and David Benoit has had a great recording career as a jazz pianist, and he also has a show on K-Jazz in Los Angeles. And so David Benoit was on keyboards, and also he played the Hammond B3, and he ran it through Leslie speakers. So the keyboards were insane. And then the bass player, Brian McNess, a monster. And, so the band was just amazing. Well, it was short-lived. They only recorded 7 songs. So yeah, here I've got this book about, Craig Ingram. Mostly it's his life story because he had such an adventurous, unconventional life. 100% artist, right? Sort of like me. I mean, I jumped off the cliff and said, "This is what I want to do." I'm just gonna struggle through. money is not that important as long as I have a roof over my head and enough food on the table. And so, yeah, he was 100% artist. He couldn't do anything else. I mean, it was all the other jobs were odd jobs, just enough money to keep recording, keep writing and recording. So, yeah, crazy.
All right. So, um, can two young lovers torn apart by sex, drugs, rock and roll, and the Vietnam War get a second chance? So, what inspired you to write Freedom Quest, a love story, and why now?
Wow, big loaded question. Well, he wanted to write his story, and he passed away in 2020. So, love of my life is gone for over 6 years now, and it
Mm,
still hurts.
sorry to hear that.
um, Thank you. But and by the way, I changed all the names in the book, so he's Michael and I'm Grace.
Grace. Mhm.
And then I changed, and people are like, "Why'd you do that?" Well, I there's a lot of the stories were told to me secondhand. I don't know if they're true or not, and there's some pretty untoward types of things that happen, and there's some people that probably wouldn't want their names put in there. So I just changed all the names, and nobody can come back and go, "Well, that's not true, and you lied." It's like I did the best I can. But he wanted to write his story, and actually, he dictated some stories to me before he passed away, which was nice to have because those were before I met him. I met him when I was 15. So, there are stories about his elementary school and junior high period, high school. I met him he was 18. He was just graduated from high school, which that was a problem too, back in the day. I mean,
Mhm.
now you could get arrested for that, although
Yeah.
he was a gentleman. I have to say, he was a gentleman. But you know, I was 15, he was 18, which back in the day wasn't as big of a deal as it is now. Anyway, so he had dictated some stories to me, like, oh, at 14 he went into the seminary to be a Catholic priest. Oh, that's interesting. So I had all these stories of his earlier period, and then one of his friends, a high school friend, a professional writer, wanted to write his story, and they started, but then he got busy on another project, so that never happened. So here was all this stuff. And then he passed away. He passed away 3 days before the COVID shutdown. It wasn't COVID related, but he died. And then, here I was all by myself. And I remember I had talked to a number of friends and family about, how. Spoiler alert, yes, we do get back together again, right? And how does that happen? Serendipity? Is it just coincidence? Is it fate? Is it destiny? What is it? And I remember, I would tell people the story, oh yeah, we met when I was 15. The way we met the first time, he was my brother's guitar teacher, and that's how the book opens. My brother walks into the local music store and meets Craig Ingraham, Michael in the book, and he's got a big bandage on his arm, and Craig or Michael says, "Whoa, man, what happened to your arm?" And he goes, "Oh, my big sister did it." And he's like, I didn't want to meet that girl. So that's how the music lessons started at our house. Well, fast forward, the way I reconnected with him, I was looking for a guitar teacher for my youngest son, and he walks back into my life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea where he was. And it turns out we were living 4 miles from each other for 10 years, and we didn't know it. I mean, how does that happen? So, that was a big question. I would tell people the story, and they're like, "Oh man, that's such a great story. You should write this." And I kept hearing this. "You should write this. You should write this. This is too good." So finally I decided it's too good. I have to do it. And so, several people wanted to write the story. I ended up writing it. And in doing so, I learned how to write, first of all. And secondly, I found out I really like it. I really enjoy the process. So I'm actually writing a second book now. Yay!
What's the name of that one, quickly?
Well, I think this one's going to stick, the title. Actually, the title for Freedom Quest, I went through 6 or 7 different titles. I couldn't figure out what to name it. But the second book is Keeping Secrets. And I think that one's going to stick for sure. Yeah.
Um, like what sort of emotions did you feel like writing um Freedom Quest? Because I'm sure there was parts of you that like there's a mission to make sure that Craig's legacy lives on forever. But I'm sure it was tough in periods, like emotionally, like trying to, reflect and piece everything together. And of course, you're piecing together the good times and the bad times. Like you said, you were in another relationship, and then um, you two found your way back together. So just talk about some of the emotions that you felt.
A lot. Yeah. Wow. There's so much. I mean, yes, I ended up going through a divorce. I mean, that was really tough for a couple of years with my children and my former husband. Luckily, everything worked out, and I worked really hard to, help people understand. My sons, for example, understand what was going on. Luckily, they were a little bit they were old enough to understand better. My oldest son was going into college, and my youngest son was a junior in high school. So, needless to say, though, it was a tough couple of years there. So the divorce, yeah. The other thing is, Craig Ingraham, after we broke up, so the Freedom Quest band broke up. Like I said, it was very short lived. There were only 7 songs recorded, and he got busted for pot, and that's how the band broke up. And one of the roadies in the band set him up, and that's how he got busted. So that was, horrible. And then he spiraled downward into a cult, a religious cult in Hawaii. So I had to sift, and when we got back together again, he told me about this, and luckily the cult leader he was in the cult for maybe 2 or 3 years in Hawaii. He escaped the cult. He ran away and had to hide out and everything. So anyway, luckily the cult leader had him write a journal the whole time. So I had all these journals. That was so hard, going through these journals where he literally it was like he had lost his mind. And I thought for sure there must have been psychedelics, like the cult leader was giving them psychedelics or stuff. And there's some quotes in the book directly from his journals from that time. And you would think that he was, totally spaced out. But I interviewed other cult members, and everybody, including Greg, said there were no drugs involved at all. So very, very weird period of time. So I had to go through all of that. When I wrote the last line of the book, I burst into tears. I was all by myself during the pandemic, and I was writing. When I started writing, I was writing 6 hours a day. 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, 2 hours at night. I could go for about 2 hours before I got totally burnt out. And I wrote the last line of the book, and I just burst into tears. Um, anyway, so I'm very proud of the book. I'm very proud of and it. And I got my first official review a couple of days ago, and it was like so good. I can't believe it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy. So yeah, but it was very tough. Yeah, very tough. So
So you did mention that you went through about 6 different names before you landed on Freedom Quest. Like, just talk about not only Michael or Craig's um, quest for freedom, but also what that meant for you as well. Like
mm,
Grace's quest for freedom.
right, yeah. That's such a loaded question. What is freedom? I think there's it's a loaded question from the political standpoint these days. I think in order to really understand what it meant to the band and why, Craig Ingraham decided to call it Freedom Quest, you have to really kind of look at that period of time, that era where, we were all hippies, right?
Hmm.
It was a different time. And I think we were questioning all of the 1950s authoritarian type of very boxed in life that we had, uh, as we were beginning to grow up. And several things happened. Psychedelics suddenly became kind of available, even though psychedelics were actually first discovered in early 1950s. They stayed within the confines of therapy, which now, luckily, it's coming back. They're talking about therapy for PTSD and alcoholism and depression and all of that. But it was only in that era for quite a while. They were doing research and all that, and then with Timothy Leary, it all kind of broke out and became mainstream, and so all of a sudden everybody was taking psychedelics, and psychedelics really opens up your mind. You start thinking about a lot about what kind of rules you question everything. So there was that, and then on top of that, there was the opportunity for women for the first time ever to have birth control. So late 60s, the first birth control pill came out. And so women all of a sudden could say, I can have sex without fear, very little fear anyway, without fear of getting pregnant. So all of a sudden, women were experimenting and saying, "Yeah, I can enjoy myself for the first time." Now, interestingly, that was a short period of time. It only lasted about 13 years, and then AIDS came in, and everything changed again as far as sexuality, was concerned. So I think if you look at the freedom quest, you have to look at it through that lens of that period. We were questioning all of the authoritarianism, all the rules, and then women were also saying, questioning their role. They could branch out and be more free in that period too.
Dr. Todd McLean provides periodontal and dental implant services in 2 convenient locations. They offer over a decade of experience treating patients, and appointments can even be scheduled in the evenings, weekends, or early mornings. Give them a call in Chapel Hill at 919-537-9774 or in Durham at 919-484-8338, or visit them online at gumsandimplants.org.
Like you said, you have Freedom Quest, and you have that itch. You have that itch to continue to write.
Mm.
Um, just talk about um that process. Talk about that process. Like, is it going to be like similar, like a love story, a drama, or are you going to go into a whole nother genre? Are you going to do like thrillers, or
No, yeah, no.
where's your head at?
It's another novel based on a true story. So I have another story that I think is just too good to pass up. I have to tell it. So it's the same itch there that I just feel like it's too good. It's too good. I have to write it. And actually, I've pitched it to a few people and talked to a few people about it, and they're like, "Oh." In fact, I had a few people tell me, professional writers and editors, they're like, "This is the book that people are going to want to read." I'm like, I had a couple of people say, "Forget about Freedom Quest. Write this book now," because the story is uh, it's about homosexuality in the 50s. It's about the fact that you had to keep it a secret, and uh, it destroyed families because of that. It wasn't because of the homosexuality. It wasn't because of the sexuality, the bisexuality, if you will, the homosexuality. It wasn't about that. It was about the secrets that had to keep had to, had to keep the secret. And that is what destroyed families. So, that's in a nutshell kind of the story that I'm writing. Um, it's going to be good. I don't want to say too much, but
No, I don't.
it's
Yeah, I
another,
understand.
it's another really, I think, a story that needs to be told. Yeah. And I think, and again, it's going to be a lens into that 1950s era again. And that, interestingly, I have a lot of gay friends, gay brothers, with a dancing career. I mean, um, I remember, in my 20s, I'd go dancing every weekend with my gay brothers. We'd go to it was the 80s, right? We'd go, dance in the discos and everything. And it was so much fun. But, there's a lot of young gay people that don't realize, I think, how hard it really was for gay people back then. It was, I mean, you would lose your job, you would lose your family, you could get hurt, you could potentially die, somebody could beat you up. I mean, it's still like that to a certain degree, but it's so much better. And so I think this story will, I hope, kind of help people understand how bad it really was and how difficult it really was. Yeah. So
Yeah, we're just as a society, we're continuously trying to, take steps forward. I mean, of course, there's roadblocks that are thrown in front on occasion, but I mean, I think at the core, everybody just wants to love. They want to love who they want to love, and I don't know why it's such an issue, for people.
better than war, right? Listen, I have changed my philosophies over the years too. I mean, I was a baby. I grew up in the 50s, and I can remember thinking, I don't know if gay marriage is right. Truly, But I did come to finally that exact conclusion that you just said. It's like, if two people love each other, why am I having a problem with it? You know, uh, I as long as they don't bother me, it's like, why should I have an issue with it? So I finally came to that conclusion. It's not my place to judge, right? As a, I, well, I'm not going to go into the political aspect of it, but, you know, it's one of the precepts of all religions. You don't judge people, and
Exactly.
let people live their lives. And as long as it's not hurting you in any way, we need to, love each other and let people live their lives and be happy, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, do you envision Freedom Quest or these upcoming book projects turning into uh, a film or?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. I've been told I write visually, and I do kind of come out of the film and television business. So my dad was an ABC television executive in Los Angeles growing up. So I actually was on a TV show at 7 years old dancing, doing my little tap dance with my friends on my dad's local channel, KABC local television show. My dad had a TV show. So I was hanging out, on the lot and going to the stage. So I kind of grew up there. Then I married. My husband um, was a television editor. I kind of grew up in the film and television business. I was also an agent for a while I was married, representing editors, post production, and other crew positions. So I do have a lot of sensibility in that area. So yeah, absolutely. I could see this Freedom Quest as a limited series or a feature film for sure. I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
too, the
uh-huh.
second book too, I think
Okay.
would make, yeah.
All right. So, yeah, you just touched on being an agent for those behind the scenes, and we had the strike a couple years ago, the Hollywood strike with the writers and all of that. Like, how can we get to the point where like everyone in the industry is appreciated and valued to the point where um we don't have to go through these crises every so often that and of course we have AI, which is another story, but how can we just fix this broken system?
Oh, man, I don't have the answer to that. I wish I did. Um, Everything's changing and so rapidly right now. I think AI is the 21st century huge, change that's happening. The 20th century was industrial revolution. Now the 21st century is AI. I really don't have a clue. I mean, I think, the unions need to keep fighting for at least regulations to slow it down and try to make sure that everybody's, getting their due. But I don't really know what the answer is at this point. And then on top of that, one of the reasons I ended up closing the agency was we had what they called runaway production, which is still happening. Everything was moving out of Los Angeles, and Canada had created these huge tax incentives back in the late 90s. And, you know, Toronto was they were calling it the New York City of the North. Vancouver was just taking all of the production up there. And, I had clients that were struggling so hard. I mean, they were losing their house, they couldn't survive. So, and I couldn't survive either. The agency started losing a lot of money, and so I ended up closing the agency because of that. I remember when I first got married, my husband, he was, as I said, a television editor, and there was I believe it was a writer's strike back mid '80s, and he didn't work for almost a year and a half. And I had a little baby. We had our second child, and we lost our home in foreclosure during that period. I'm tired. I can't think. I can't, all the stuff that's happened to me. It's like, oh my God. So yeah, it's a tough situation. I hope that I think the unions are important, and I think we need to keep fighting for our due. There's, I think, maybe in the industry, the film and television industry, as well as all the other sectors, there's too much money at the top. There's not enough money filtering down. I mean, that is obvious, and greed is rampant, and that's too bad. So I hope some of those are kind of the main issues, the essences, I think, of the problem. Um, yeah, that's all I can say. I wish I had some magic bullet, you
Yeah,
know?
we all do because
Hmm.
like I said, it's a mess. Um, like I said, you're teaching dance classes, you're teaching
No, no,
French.
I teach French. Yeah, I no, I
I
haven't taught dance in
I
many
thought I
years.
thought you were teaching dance.
No,
Not anymore.
no, not anymore. No,
Okay. So you're just teaching French.
correct. Yeah. Actually,
Okay.
I retired from teaching French about a year ago, so I'm not even teaching French anymore.
Okay.
I stopped teaching in order to focus on my writing and the book. So the book promo, yes. So I'm not teaching right now. I don't I don't see myself going back to it at this point. But we'll see.
Mhm.
Never say never.
What do you enjoy doing when you're not writing or creating, like doing the music thing, like non-creative activities? What do you enjoy doing? Cooking, stuff like that?
Walking my dog
Uh-huh.
along Lake Michigan. That
Okay.
takes up a lot of my time. My dog, Callie, is a husky rescue, husky mix. So she needs a lot of exercise. So I have to walk her 3 times a day. And our first walk of the morning. So normally, if I'm writing, I am actually not writing right now because I'm so focused on the promo for the book. And I just got off a book tour of the West Coast. Just got back Sunday, this past Sunday, and so I'm actually not writing right now, which is driving me crazy. But I usually write from 5 to 7 a.m. And then Callie wakes me up about 7 and we take off. And my first walk of the morning is usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours long. And Lake Michigan is so amazing. I just moved to Chicago 3 years ago from Los Angeles. And it looks like the ocean. I can't believe it. There's waves, there's seagulls, there's sand. Uh, the only difference is occasionally, well, the cold, but also occasionally you'll see ducks on the water, and you go, wait a minute. Now, then you know it's fresh water. But we take a long walk along Lake Michigan every morning, and then I have to take her for a walk in midday and then again in the evenings. And so that really clears my head. And then the other thing is I play electric bass. So I know that's creative, but it is like also a downtime for me where I can just play and I just play along to music and stuff. And then I'm in a band. So that's a lot of fun. So we're not like shooting for any stardom or anything. We just play for fun. Hold on. Oh, I've
Bless
got
you.
allergies really bad right now, so my apologies.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's May and you're in Chicago, so
Yeah.
I'm assuming the pollen is bad there.
Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
had allergies in LA too, so I blame it on my second son. I never had allergies until after he was born, and I was like, "What's this?" And I went to the doctor, and she's like, "Well, sometimes your hormones change after you give birth." I'm like, "What?" And I've had them ever since, so it's all my son's fault. Anyway,
Yeah, so I'm in South Florida and
oh
we
yeah.
don't have pollen, but I was living in North Carolina before that and it was terrible. Like you couldn't even walk near your car because it was just yellow and
Ooh.
I was like I had to get
Yeah,
away. I had to leave this place. But
yeah.
but I usually like to ask guests to like what's something about them that they find most surprising, but I kind of want to know what was something about Craig that you found most surprising.
That he ended up in a cult. I mean, I was like, what? um, so yeah, after the band broke up, uh, there was a potential record deal on the table. And then I left him too. So I didn't see him for almost 30 years. I had no idea what was going on. And was raising my kids, and working, doing the talent agency and all that. And so, I got back together with him. I'm like, how did this happen? How could you possibly let this happen? And interestingly, when I was writing the book, when I started having, editors read it, one of the notes I kept getting was, I don't believe that Michael would join a cult. He's too smart. He's too talented. It doesn't make sense. And I'm like, well, it's true. So I had to really go back and try to kind of pump up the reasons, how did this happen? And, for him to join the cult. So that was kind of interesting. They say truth is stranger than fiction. You know, readers were not believing that he would join a cult. So that was really, really surprising to me, you know. But I think, you know, I understand it now. And I think the readers that are now reading it are like, oh, yeah, I see how that happened. So, you know, I think hopefully it's understandable now. It's the same old thing, you know, the cult leader knows it, learns everything about you, and then uses all of that information, turns it around, you know. I mean, this guy was a real manipulator. So the other thing I worked hard on and learned more about was Craig had this amazing ability to be able to remember anything he heard. And that was something that I really didn't understand totally until after he passed away, and I started researching the book. And I realized that I looked it up actually. There's actually a term for it. It's called hypophonesia, where it's not every, you know, some people remember what they see, but he was able to remember what he heard. And I thought that was quite unique. I'm not an expert, or, you know, he was never tested for that or anything, but in retrospect, looking back at his career, I mean, he used to put a transistor up against his ear at night before he went to bed because he said the music drove him crazy. The music going through his head drove him crazy. So he would listen to a transistor radio. He'd listen to Top 40 back in the day, and he found out in the morning he remembered all the words to all the songs that he'd listened to. And so, I mean, he was amazing. He could play for hours, you know. And if he came to a party and pulled out his guitar, people would just like, oh, hey, remember that song, you know, by the Supremes or whatever? And he'd go, oh, yeah, sure. And he could play the whole thing, all the verses, you know. How does that happen? I asked him one time, how do you do that? And he said, oh, a movie starts in my head. I watch the movie as I'm singing. That was interesting. So he was quite a unique character, so had to write it.
So my last question before we prepare to close, and it's based on the fact that your relationship with Craig is a fairy tale, and like the fact that you two didn't see each other for 30 years and then ended up back together, like just talk about that, because I'll say, like, even in my case, like my high school sweetheart, we went 20 years without seeing each other, and then we just, I mean, of course we had Facebook and all of that to where we could still kind of be in contact with each other. We reconnected, you know, hung out several times, but realized that, you know, the nostalgia effect wore off, and it wasn't the same, but we still have love for each other, you know, as friends, or just being a significant part of each other's past. But there wasn't a future there. Like,
Uh-huh.
how
Yeah.
did, yeah, how did you realize that this is the past, present, and the future?
When I saw him again, when I reconnected with him, I did ask myself those questions. I immediately called my brother, who, you know, he had been my brother's guitar teacher. Called my brother and I said, oh my God, I found Craig Ingraham. And he's like, well, you're not going to see him, right? Because you're married. And I'm like, you're right. I'm not going to see him. And that lasted about 10 days. But honestly, it was like something just leapt in my heart when I found out he was in the neighborhood. And, he, you know, friend of a friend said, oh, you know, there's only one guy I would recommend for my son's guitar teacher, Craig Ingraham. And I'm, oh my God. I was ecstatic. It was like a volcano had erupted, you know. I hadn't even seen him yet. I had kept his engagement ring. We had gotten engaged for a short period of time. I had kept that in my jewelry box, never put it on. You know, I had always thought about him. I wonder where he is, and, you know, all of that. I married, and even my husband and I, we admitted, well, I went into therapy at that point. I went into therapy. And I was seeing a therapist like once or twice a week trying to, I was asking myself the question, am I just trying to relive my past? Am I going through a midlife crisis? Am I trying to relive my my teens, my 20s or whatever? But it was undeniable, the love that we had. And interestingly, Craig, or Michael in the book, had never gotten married, never had children, and always talked about me to all his friends. The regret that he had not been a better person, and the losing me was the biggest regret of his life. So when we got back together again, I saw that he had grown up. That was the reason I broke up with him. In fact, the first 7 years, we went together 7 years at the beginning. I broke up with him 6 times in 7 years. I would just get exasperated with him because he was so free, if you will, just so crazy. I mean, there were drugs, there were groupies, it was just, I was scared. I was scared I was going to be a drug overdose, or something, or get arrested, which he ended up getting arrested, right? So I left him. But when I saw him again, I looked in his eyes and I saw he had grown up finally. It took a long time, but he was 53 at that point, and he had grown up. And it was just undeniable. There was nothing I could do. So we ended up, getting back together again. And we had 20 years together the second time around. And we did some great things. We did the documentary at that point about our high school friend, Bill Perkins. And we put a band together again. We were singing again with some of the Freedom Quest members, original members, and it was amazing. So I think soulmate does exist. I don't think everybody gets the opportunity, and maybe some people, a lot of people say, oh, I just admire that so much that you were able to have that, but it's very intense also. I went through a divorce. I went through a lot of changes with the relationship with him. But the love was undeniable. There's a scene in the book where Michael goes, God, how does this happen? How do we get back together again? Is it just fate? That was one of the titles for the book. The first title for the book was Fate. And, is it fate? Is it just coincidence? How does this happen? And Grace goes, yeah, if we could just figure that out and bottle it, we'd be billionaires. If we could figure out how to get that synchronicity to happen in our lives, nobody knows, and then it wouldn't be serendipitous if we could figure it out. But, and then there's another, I don't know. It just felt like we've been, there is a moment in the book where it feels like we've been together through many lifetimes, if you will, through many, millennia, if you will. And I still feel his presence so strongly. There he is right there.
I see you.
Yeah.
Hey, Craig.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what can I say? Just, I couldn't deny it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Kind of looks like Jim Morrison.
Yeah, he does. He was about 24 back then. Yeah.
All right. So, where can we get our hands on Freedom Quest?
Pretty much anywhere. If you go to my website, Amazon, bookshop.org is great because you can actually give some credit to your local bookstore. So that's a great site. Barnes and Noble online, you can reach, so you can find it pretty much anywhere. And if you go to my website, you could actually request a signed copy, and it'll be sent out. So there's details on that too on the website. There's also events. There's another event coming up May 17th in Chicago here. So, and there should be more. I think I'm going to kind of take a break after the May 17th one, and see what's next, So
Well, Deborah, this has been fun.
it has been fun. I wish we could keep going.
Well, you have other books coming, so you come
Thank,
back and we can do it again.
thank you so much. What a great interview. Thank
Oh,
you.
oh, thank you, Deborah.
Yeah.
All right, so
Been a,
like she said, get your hands on Freedom Quest: A Love Story. It's on their website. If you want the signed copy, of course, you can go to all of the known book distributors and purchase it as well. Uh, Listen to the soundtrack done by Craig as well in the band. Yeah, like I said, anytime you're welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I tell your listeners if they read the book and they want to reach out to me, I'd love to hear from them.
Okay, will do. All
Thank
right.
you.
All right, so for Stop, Look, and Listen, I'm your host, LeTroy Gardner. See you next week. Peace and blessings.
Ciao.